My heart thundered in my chest as I slipped into the dimly lit riverside cafe, leaving a trail of muddy footprints on the tiled floor. I was barefoot, clutching my ruined high heels in one hand. My dark hair hung in damp, tangled strands around my face. The hem of my dress was caked with wet earth and dust from ancient bricks. I spotted the man sitting alone at the corner table, tall, composed, with an air of quiet authority. Luca DeSantis, I realized, recalling Julia's description of my blind date. He looked up in mild surprise as I approached, but his sharp brown eyes quickly took in my disheveled state, without a hint of judgment. I slid into the chair across from him and leaned forward, struggling to steady my breathing. "Pretend you know me. Don't look behind me," I whispered urgently, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. I placed one hand flat on the table to stop it from shaking. Behind me, through the cafe's glass wall overlooking the Adige River, I glimpsed a dark figure lurking near the stone railing. My pursuers were still here. Luca's expression didn't flicker. With a calm that steadied me, he offered a slight, reassuring smile. "There you are, Bella," he said smoothly, loudly enough for anyone watching to hear. He reached across the small table, covering my mud-streaked hand with his own warm, steady one, as if we were old friends or lovers. The gesture caught me off guard. I stiffened. But I understood the play. To anyone observing, we looked like a normal couple meeting late at night. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Through the rain-blurred window, I saw a man in a black coat loitering just outside under a street lamp. His phone raised as if recording or photographing us. The sight made my blood run cold. They had found me. Luca gave my hand a gentle squeeze, reclaiming my attention. "You're safe now," he murmured under his breath. His tone was so steady it was almost hypnotic. The rich timbre of his voice was surprisingly soothing given the circumstances. He acted utterly unruffled by the mud, the late hour, or my cryptic arrival. It was as if menacing strangers following mud-soaked women into cafes were a nightly occurrence to him. A waiter approached timidly, eyeing the puddle forming around my bare feet. Before he could ask anything, Luca nodded to him. "Still water, please, and a bowl of whatever soup is freshest tonight," he requested calmly, as if nothing were amiss. I opened my mouth to protest. I didn't have time to sit and eat. But Luca's eyes flicked to mine, dark and intent. "You look like you could use something warm," he said quietly. There was no pity in his gaze, only a kind of matter-of-fact concern that made my throat tighten unexpectedly. My pulse was still racing. I was torn between the urge to look over my shoulder again and the equally strong urge to break down and cry now that I was momentarily safe. But I didn't dare fall apart. I couldn't. Instead, I drew a shaky breath and nodded in thanks as the waiter set a glass of water in front of me. Luca still hadn't let go of my hand. His thumb brushed a smear of mud on my skin, and I became acutely aware of how filthy I must seem. I'm sorry," I began softly, embarrassed. "This isn't how I usually—" He held up a finger subtly, silencing me while giving the waiter a polite smile as the soup arrived. Only once we were alone again did he speak. "Eat a little," he urged, dipping the spoon once to stir the fragrant broth. "Slowly, it will help." I realized then how hungry I was. The adrenaline of the chase had masked it, but the savory aroma rising from the bowl made my stomach clench. I hadn't eaten since lunch at the restoration workshop. Hesitantly, I picked up the spoon and sipped. Warm, salty broth coated my tongue, and I nearly moaned at the comfort it provided. For a brief moment, the normalcy of soup in a cafe at midnight almost made me forget the danger outside. Almost. My eyes flicked to Luca. He was studying me openly now, his gaze tracking the state of my dress, my torn handbag strap, the fine dusting of old stone powder on my sleeves. His brow furrowed ever so slightly, as if the details puzzled him. He leaned back, still exuding that unshakable calm. "Elena Moretti, right?" he said quietly. The way he pronounced my name in his smooth Italian baritone sent a strange little shiver through me. I nodded, swallowing another spoonful of soup. "Julia told me you might be a bit late," Luca continued, his lips curving in a faint half-smile. "But she didn't mention you'd arrive quite so—" He paused, choosing his words carefully as his eyes glinted with gentle humor. "Dramatically." Despite everything, a shaky laugh escaped me. The sound surprised me. I hadn't laughed in days. This wasn't exactly my plan, I replied under my breath, casting another wary glance toward the windows. The man outside was still there, pretending to check his phone now, but clearly keeping watch. I ducked my head, letting my dark hair curtain my face. Luca noticed my furtive glance. Instead of turning to look, he gave my hand another light squeeze to recapture my focus. 10 minutes, he said, in a low, deliberate voice. Sit for 10 minutes, Elena. I'll buy you silence. I blinked at the odd phrase. Was that an offer or a command? His tone was composed, but his eyes held a serious promise. I realized he meant he could buy me time, perhaps even pay off whoever was after me, to keep me safe, at least for a few minutes. I don't need money, I whispered, confused and a little offended. Did he think I was some kind of beggar? My cheeks burned, and I tried to pull my hand away, but Luca didn't let go, not hard enough to hurt, just firm. You misunderstand, he said quickly, voice softening. I only mean I can help if you let me. 10 minutes, no more. Then you can decide what to do next. Okay? He looked into my eyes, and I found myself nodding before I knew it. There was something steady and earnest there. He might have been a stranger, a blind date of all things. But in this moment, Luca DeSantis was the only person between me and whatever waited outside. I sipped more soup, trying to gather my wits. They think I took something, I confided after a minute, my voice barely above a breath. The admission came unbidden. I felt oddly safe under his steady gaze. Luca inclined his head slightly, not looking shocked, which in itself was surprising. Did you? He asked calmly, as if we were discussing the weather. My fingers tightened around the warm ceramic bowl. Not on purpose, I murmured. It fell into my hands, literally. I was working, restoring a fresco in an old palazzo, and there was a hidden compartment. I thought it was a piece of the masonry at first, but my breath hitched as I remembered the clatter of boots chasing me through the tunnel, the panic as I scrabbled through the earth to escape. Under the table, my stockinged foot jiggled anxiously. I ran when they came after me, hid wherever I could. There was an old tunnel by the river. I only just got out. I glanced down at the dried mud on my once blue dress, evidence of my crawl through the riverbank muck. Luca listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. He hadn't once turned to look behind me or towards the windows. Instead, he seemed to be observing the cafe's reflection in the dark glass of a framed painting on the wall, using it to monitor the outside. Clever, I realized. I risked another peek over my shoulder. That man was still out there, joined now by a second figure across the street. A sleek black SUV idled at the curb, its headlights off but engine unmistakably running. Fear stabbed through me anew. They were waiting for me to leave the cafe. Luca, I whispered urgently. They're still I see them, he murmured. Gently, he slid his hand from mine at last and draped his arm over the back of his chair in a relaxed pose. But I saw how his fingers tapped the air subtly. A signal. At the bar, the waiter, who had been studiously polishing a glass, caught the motion. He gave a minute nod and then disappeared through a staff door without a word. My gaze flickered in confusion. Was the waiter in on this? Luca's voice pulled me back. Listen carefully, he said, leaning forward as if he were about to tell me a secret. In a moment, I'm going to stand up and walk to the entrance. It will look like I'm leaving, but I won't go far. My eyes widened. You're leaving me here? I hissed, panic rising. The idea of being alone when those men came for me. No, I'm going to draw their attention, Luca clarified. His tone was patient, almost gentle. They expect you to bolt, but if I move first, perhaps they'll wonder if I'm a threat to them. A ghost of a grin touched his lips, and I can be, if needed. I didn't doubt it. Despite his civilized appearance, charcoal suit, silver watch glinting under the lights, Luca had a coiled energy about him, a sense of contained danger. He carried himself with a confidence that belied mere wine exporting, which was what Julia had told me he did. Before I could protest further, he was already pushing back his chair. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, and to my surprise, he draped it around my shoulders. The soft scent of expensive cologne and a whiff of his underlying warmth enveloped me. You might be cold, he offered quietly. Then he straightened to his full height and adjusted the cuffs of his crisp white shirt with unhurried grace. To anyone watching, he looked like a man preparing to leave a late-night date, polite and relaxed. My shoulders felt suddenly bare without his hand on mine. Luca caught my eye. 10 minutes, he reminded me in a low voice. No running. He added in a tone that almost made me believe he could enforce it without lifting a finger. I swallowed hard and clutched the lapels of his jacket around me. For a beat, I locked eyes with him. Don't leave me, I wanted to say. though I hardly knew him. But I bit my tongue and gave a tiny nod instead. True to his word, Luca turned and strode casually toward the cafe's entrance. His posture was loose, nonchalant, but I saw the way he subtly rolled his shoulders, as if readying for a fight. The two men outside straightened, watching him through the glass door. They didn't attack him. Maybe they assumed he was just a patron leaving and not involved with me. As Luca neared the door, I heard the low rumble of the black SUV's engine increase, gearing up to intercept him. My heart lurched. What if they tried to hurt him? He was only doing this because I'd dragged him into my mess. Suddenly, a man stepped out from the night and blocked the doorway from the outside. I recognized him immediately, the same broad-shouldered man who had chased me from the palazzo earlier, now with a cruel smile plastered on his face. He wore a dark jacket with a security services emblem on the chest. In the reflection of the window, I saw another man approach behind Luca's shoulder, effectively trapping him between them. Customers in the cafe fell silent, sensing the tension as these men closed in. My pulse skyrocketed. This was a mistake. Luca was outnumbered and unarmed as far as I knew. I shot up from my seat, letting the spoon clatter into the soup bowl. Before I could call out, the man in the security jacket opened the door partway and said with false pleasantness, "Sorry to intrude so late." His gaze slid past Luca and landed on me. "Miss Moretti, isn't it? You dropped your pendant earlier." In his gloved hand, he held up a small, gleaming object, my grandmother's gold pendant necklace, the one I'd found hidden in the fresco. My blood went cold. I hadn't even realized it was no longer in my pocket. I must have lost it during the chase. How did he? My mind raced. He couldn't be an actual policeman, despite the jacket. This felt wrong. All wrong. Luca's stance shifted slightly as he took in the scene. Me frozen halfway out of my seat, the pendant in the stranger's hand. I saw Luca's jaw tighten. His eyes flicked to the emblem on the man's jacket, then to the pendant, and finally back to the man's face. Something dangerous flashed in his expression. "That's very kind of you," Luca said evenly, his voice carrying through the silent cafe. "But I'll take it, if you don't mind. My friend here is a bit shaken tonight." He extended his hand toward the man, as if expecting him to simply hand over the necklace. The man with the pendant just smiled coldly. His free hand rested casually near his hip, where I now noticed a holster under his jacket. I sucked in a breath. Was that a gun? People at nearby tables began to whisper nervously. "I'm afraid I need a word with Miss Moretti," the faux officer said. "Official security business, you understand." His tone was oily, overly polite. Luca didn't budge. "Strange," he replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "Since when does the city's security service pursue art restorers in the middle of the night, and with no backup or marked vehicle?" At that, his voice dropped, and there was an edge like a blade in it now. "Whatever badge you're about to show me, that's not police." The man's smug expression flickered at Luca's words. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. My heart felt like it was lodged in my throat. How did Luca know? Who exactly was this man I'd sat down with? The front door's glass exploded inward with a deafening crash. Then with a harsh electric snap, the overhead lights cut out, plunging the cafe into darkness save for the faint glow of emergency exit signs. Shards rained across the cafe floor, and patrons screamed and dove for cover. In the chaos, a powerful arm wrapped around my waist from behind and yanked me down. I gasped as I was pulled against a solid chest. "Luca." "Down," he hissed, his breath warm against my ear. We crouched behind the heavy wooden table as a second shattering sound came. Someone had smashed the remaining glass panel to clear the entrance. My heart hammered wildly. In the dim light, I could just make out two dark figures stepping through the destroyed doorway, boots crunching on glass. The faux security officer and his partner. A third man, tall and lanky, followed. They must have been waiting by the SUV. Luca's hand pressed my head gently down, shielding me as people rushed past us in a panic toward the kitchen exit. Overturned chairs and spilled drinks littered the floor. The intruders weren't even trying to disguise their pursuit now. "Stay behind me," Luca whispered. In the same moment, I saw him draw something from the back of his waistband, glinting metal. My stomach flipped. Luca was armed too. He nodded toward a hallway behind the bar, leading to the restrooms and a private lounge, and keeping low, he guided me swiftly across the room. We slipped behind the swinging door into a narrow corridor. My bare feet were silent on the cool tiles, but Luca's dress shoes made soft thuds. I bit my lip. praying none of the pursuers saw us break away. We hurried deeper into the semi-dark hallway. Luca shouldered open a door marked private and ushered me into a small back room, perhaps the cafe owner's office or a VIP tasting room. It was silent and filled with the rich scent of coffee beans and leather. He shut the door quietly, then moved in front of me, gun raised toward the entrance. In the gloom, lit only by a single green exit sign, Luca's profile was eerily calm. The gun in his steady hand looked like an extension of him, not out of place at all. "Who are you, Luca?" I wondered, equal parts grateful and bewildered by this deadly competence. In a shaky whisper, I stammered, Who are you?" pressing myself against the wall. Luca kept his eyes on the door, posture tense but voice calm. "Someone who doesn't like men who lie about badges," he answered quietly. My hands trembled, not just from fear. A minute ago, I thought Luca was simply a blind date with impeccable manners. Now I didn't know what to think. A muffled voice echoed from the main cafe. "Spread out, find her." It was the man with my pendant, barking orders to his cohorts. I flinched, backing up until I hit a bookshelf. My fingers closed around a heavy ceramic figurine on a shelf, a makeshift weapon, if it came to that. I wasn't going to be dragged away without a fight. Luca glanced back at me, his face illuminated faintly by the exit sign's glow. "There's a back door through the kitchen," he whispered, gesturing in that direction. "If we time it right..." The creak of the hallway door cut him off. Footsteps echoed just outside our hiding spot. The pursuers were getting closer. Before I could react, Luca stepped forward and, to my surprise, slipped the gun into my hands. My eyes widened in shock. He was arming me? He leaned in, his lips nearly brushing my ear as he whispered, "If anyone but me opens that door, point and shoot. Safety's off. Do you understand?" I swallowed, my mouth dry. The metal felt cold and alien in my grip. I had never even held a gun before. "Luca, I can't..." "Yes, you can." His whisper was steady, eyes locked on mine even in the dimness. "I trust you." "I keep behind the desk." He didn't wait for an answer. Luca moved silently toward the door, positioning himself just out of sight of the narrow glass pane set into it. My heart thundered as I crouched behind the desk, both hands clutching the pistol, trying to keep it from shaking. My pulse pounded in my ears. The absurd thought flashed that this was the worst blind date in history, and yet I felt safer with Luca than I had with anyone in a very long time. The door burst open. I stifled a yelp. A beam from a tactical flashlight sliced across the small room, landing on dust motes in the leather couch. A man's silhouette filled the doorway, not Luca. He took one step in, a pistol drawn, flashlight mounted on it making my eyes water. I rose instinctively from behind the desk, arms extended with Luca's gun. The muzzle trembled because I was trembling. Don't move!" I tried to shout, but my voice came out as a cracked whisper. The intruder laughed, a low chuckle. He swung the flashlight toward my voice, landing the blinding beam on my face. I winced, finger twitching on the trigger. "Well, look at you," he drawled. It was the second man from earlier, not the one who spoke at the door, likely one of the hired thugs. I could see his cruel smile behind the light. "Hand that over before you hurt yourself, sweetheart." I steadied my grip, remembering Luca's words. I tried to channel Luca's calm authority. "Take one more step, and I will shoot," I managed, forcing as much conviction into the words as I could. He took another step. A deafening crack split the air as a gunshot rang out, but it wasn't from my gun. The man grunted, the flashlight clattering to the floor and plunging us into semi-darkness. He stumbled, clutching his right shoulder. Behind him, Luca materialized like a shadow. He had come from behind the door, firing his second weapon, a sleek handgun now pointed at the thug's head. The man dropped to his knees with a groan, blood seeping between his fingers. I gasped, lowering my weapon. The realization hit me. Luca had armed me with a decoy to distract the thug's attention while he flanked him from behind. He never expected me to actually shoot. He just needed the man to focus on me long enough. "Nice work," Luca murmured quickly, taking the gun from my hands with one swift motion. I stood there in shock as he pulled a zip tie from somewhere and bound the wounded man's hands behind his back in 2 efficient moves. Before I could speak, a slow clap came from the doorway. We both snapped our heads up. Silhouetted by the faint light from the hall, the man with the security jacket, the one Luca had called out, stood there, applauding sardonically. "Bravo, DeSantis," the man said, voice dripping with smug amusement. "I see the rumors of your chivalry weren't exaggerated. A white knight on a blind date? How quaint." DeSantis, the way he said it, like a title or a curse, my stomach turned. Why did that name sound familiar? Luca tensed at my side, gun trained on the newcomer. "Captain Sarah." Luca greeted him coolly. His voice echoed in the small room. "Your jurisdiction must be getting broad if you're harassing women in cafes now." "Captain." I squinted through the gloom and realized the emblem on the man's jacket was indeed some sort of official crest. Was he actually with law enforcement? But Luca had said. Sarah chuckled, stepping just into the room with his hands visible, though I didn't doubt a weapon was at his hip. "Tonight isn't about jurisdiction. It's about tying up loose ends. Now why don't you hand the lady over? This doesn't concern you." Luca's arm stretched protectively in front of me. "I'm afraid I can't do that," he said softly. "She's my guest, and in my city, guests don't disappear." The words were calm, but I felt the dangerous undercurrent. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it was a promise. Luca DeSantis was a man who did not take kindly to demands. Sarah's eyes slid to me, and I shivered at their predatory gleam. Miss Moretti stumbled into something she shouldn't have. I'm simply here to relieve her of it and send her on her way. He flashed an unctuous smile. Safe and sound, of course. My temper flared despite my fear. Chasing me through tunnels and firing gunshots at me is a funny way to keep me safe and sound, I retorted before I could stop myself. My voice was steadier now, anger overlaying fear. Sarah ignored me, his gaze flicking to the bound and groaning thug on the floor, then back to Luca. "DeSantis, you have no idea what game you've just stepped into. That pendant she's carrying, it could expose a lot of people. People you and I both know. Hand it over and we all walk away like gentlemen." Luca's gun never wavered. "I think we both know you stopped being a gentleman when you started hunting an innocent woman under false pretenses," he said. "How much is Ridzi paying you, Or is it someone higher up these days?" Sarah's confident smirk faltered, just a fraction. He recovered quickly, but my heart skipped. Rizzi. That name I did know. Gabriele Rizzi, a notorious figure whispered in Verona's underbelly. I'd heard it on the news. Suspected in extortion and rackets. Never proven. If Rizzi wanted the pendant, oh, what had I gotten myself into? Sarah stepped further in, and now the light caught his face. He was middle-aged, hawk-nosed, with the bored arrogance of someone who thought he held all the cards. His hand hovered near his holster as he addressed Luca again. "Last chance, the girl and the pendant. We can all be home in time for a nightcap." Luca's stance shifted subtly. I sensed coiled anger beneath his composed exterior. "The lady is not going anywhere with you, Captain," he said through clenched teeth. "And neither is the pendant." As if on cue, something small and metallic rolled out from under one of the overturned chairs, clinking against the leg of the desk. The pendant, my grandmother's pendant, must have fallen during the scuffle. In the half-light, I could see its gold surface glinting and the distinctive crest etched on it. Everyone's eyes darted to the object. Sarah's gleamed with triumph. He took a step forward. "Don't," Luca warned, pressing back against me protectively with his free hand while aiming his gun at Sarah's chest. With his other gun still in his left hand, did he have two the whole time? I marveled. He motioned for me to pick up the pendant. "Elena," he murmured, never looking back, "take it." I hesitated only a second before crouching and scooping up the cool engraved pendant. My fingers closed around it tightly. Immediately, Sarah's jaw clenched in frustration. "Now," Luca said quietly, "I think it's time we exit this little farce." Sarah barked a humorless laugh. "Exit? You think I'll just let you two stroll out of here? You may have clout in this city, DeSantis, but this is beyond your usual territory. Hand her over, or—" A sudden buzz cut through the tension, a cell phone vibrating on silent. For a confused second, I thought it was mine, but the glow was coming from Luca's pocket. Keeping both guns trained on Sarah and the doorway, Luca slid his phone out with his thumb and glanced at the screen. In the low light, I saw his eyes narrow sharply as he read whatever message appeared. Something in his controlled expression finally cracked. Alarm, rage, dread, all flickered through in an instant before he masked it. He lowered the phone, and a muscle in his jaw twitched as he spoke, voice deadly calm. "Sarah, call off your men. Right, now." Captain Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Bold of you to give me orders." "I'm not the one who just kidnapped an old woman," Luca growled, tossing the phone to him with a slide across the floor. The lit screen skidded to a stop by Sarah's feet. "Read it." My heart lurched. "Old woman? kidnapped? I edged closer, my back brushing Luca's arm for support. Sarah's eyes flicked down to the phone's screen. Even from a distance, I could see the message in stark white letters. Midnight. Ponte Pietra. Bring the pendant. Or the woman who matters to Elena dies. A strangled sound escaped my throat. Woman who matters to me. My mind instantly flashed to my mother asleep in her little house on the outskirts of the city. Mama. No, I gasped, the blood draining from my face. My knees nearly gave out. Luca steadied me automatically with an arm around my shoulders. Sarah's face hardened as he read the message. Orders from your boss? Luca demanded coldly. The captain sneered. But there was uncertainty in his eyes now. Looks like the decision's out of my hands, he said, backing toward the door. Midnight at the Ponte Pietra bridge it is. If I were you, I'd be punctual. With that parting shot, Sarah slipped out into the hallway. I could hear him barking commands to withdraw, his voice echoing as he retreated. My entire body was shaking. They had my mother. The phone in Sarah's hand seemed to blur as tears filled my eyes. I swayed on my feet, choking back a sob. I felt the blood drain from my face as I finally whispered. My mother. 1:30 a.m. DeSantis Villa, hills outside Verona. The black sedan screeched up a winding gravel drive flanked by looming cypress trees. I barely registered the grandeur of the villa coming into view, a stately old stone mansion perched above the city, before we rolled to a stop. Luca was out of the car almost before the engine died. Coming around to open my door, I stumbled out, legs weak with exhaustion and adrenaline. The night air up here was cool and carried the scent of grapevines and wet earth. Far below, the lights of Verona glittered along the Adige River, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding in my life. A stout older woman stood under the portico's warm light, wrapped in a knitted shawl despite the hour. Her gray hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and sharp brown eyes appraised us as we approached. Instead of looking shocked by my muddy, disheveled state or the late hour, her face crinkled in relief the moment she saw Luca. Grazie a Dio! She exclaimed, rushing forward. Luca, Caro, you had me worried sick. I was about to send Marco to drag you home. Luca gave a weary, affectionate smile. I'm sorry, Nonna Rosa. Things got complicated, Nonna Rosa. This formidable woman was his grandmother? I stood there uncertainly, still wrapped in Luca's suit jacket, shivering now that the adrenaline was wearing off. My teeth chattered, and I realized I was still barefoot on the cold gravel. Nonna's gaze shifted to me, taking in every detail, the mud spattered on my dress and skin, my red-rimmed eyes, and my unsteady stance. Her expression softened at once. Oh, you poor thing, she clucked, shrugging off her shawl and draping it around my shoulders, right over Luca's jacket. Before I could protest, she had taken my arm gently. Come inside, Bella. You're half frozen. I let this stranger guide me up the steps, too drained to object. The moment we crossed the threshold, warmth and the scent of rosemary and tomato enveloped us. My stomach rumbled faintly at the smell, reminding me I hadn't eaten more than a few spoonfuls of soup. The foyer and adjoining living area were rustic and inviting. Terracotta tiles, heavy wooden beams, and a crackling fireplace. Despite the late hour, a pot simmered on an old-fashioned stove in what looked like a cozy kitchen off to the right. Nonna Rosa tutted under her breath, steering me toward a long farm-style table in the kitchen. You're thin as a pigeon and white as mozzarella, she fussed. Sit. I'll get you something warm to eat and then we talk. Nonna, please, you don't have to, I began, embarrassed by the fuss. Hush, darling. In this house, food first, talk after, she insisted, pressing me firmly onto a chair. My body sank gratefully into it. Luca hovered nearby, pulling out another chair but not yet sitting. Is everything secure? He asked quietly, presumably to his men who had followed us in. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a shaved head, Marco, I assumed, stepped forward from the foyer. Perimeter is clear. We have 2 on watch outside, boss, he reported, then eyed me curiously. At the word boss, my eyes darted to Luca. He gave a slight nod of acknowledgement to Marco. Boss, of course, not just a businessman, this was his domain. The authority in Luca's voice, and the deference of his men, even the way this villa felt like a well-guarded fortress. It all clicked. Luca DeSantis wasn't simply a wealthy wine exporter. He had an empire of some sort with soldiers to command. Perhaps Julia truly didn't know who she'd set me up with. Or maybe she did. Either way, I was now under the protection of someone as dangerous as those chasing me. It was a disquieting realization. Yet, deep down, and I felt safer here than anywhere I'd been in a long time. Thank you, Marco, Luca said. You and Stefano get some rest after your watch. We'll rotate at dawn. Marco nodded and disappeared silently down the hall. Nonna returned with a steaming bowl and set it in front of me. A rich aroma wafted up. Pasta e fagioli, if I wasn't mistaken. A hearty bean and pasta soup. My vision blurred for a second. The simple kindness of a hot meal after the night's terror nearly undid me. Grazie, I whispered. My voice cracked, and I realized I was on the verge of tears again. I busied myself with the spoon to hide it. Nonna patted my shoulder. Eat, cara mia. Then she rounded on Luca with a glare and smacked his arm lightly with a wooden spoon she'd brought from the stove. As for you, causing trouble at this hour. Do you know how many prayers I said since your phone call? Next time, try not to wait until bullets are flying to let me know you'll be late. Mi dispiace, nonna, Luca said contritely, rubbing his arm with a sheepish look that made him seem far younger for a moment. It was unavoidable. Humph. She eyed the dried blood on his cuff, from the thug he shot, presumably, and the torn fabric at his elbow. Unavoidable, he says. Were you hurt? No, just a scratch, Luca assured, glancing at me as I quietly sipped the soup. It was delicious and warming, full of savory herbs and the comfort of a homemade meal. I could feel strength returning with each bite. Nonna followed his gaze, her expression shrewd. Well, what's done is done. Now, who is this lovely young lady you've dragged in looking like something the cat rolled in? My cheeks flushed. I must have been a sight. Dried mud everywhere. Barefoot, my dress torn and stained. I started to mumble an introduction, but Luca spoke first. This is Elena Moretti, he said gently. She ran into some trouble tonight, and I offered our help. Trouble indeed, Nonna said, eyebrows lifting as if to say obviously. She took in my appearance again, and I saw concern in her face. Elena, figlia mia, are you hurt anywhere? Any dizziness? I'm okay, I replied, touched by her genuine worry. Just a little overwhelmed. Thank you for letting me stay here, Mrs. DeSantis. She waved a hand. Call me Nonna. Everyone does. And don't thank me yet. Just eat. Luca finally sat down across from me, steepling his fingers. In the soft lamplight of the kitchen, he looked as tired as I felt, but his eyes remained keen. Elena, I know tonight has been hell, but I need you to think back carefully. Did you see where they took your mother? Or any clue? I flinched, nearly dropping the spoon. The mention of my mother brought it all crashing back. The soup in my stomach turned to stone. I put the spoon down, my appetite gone. They were at her house, I think, I said shakily. She wasn't answering when I tried to call earlier at the cafe. God, I should have called the police right away when I realized. You did the right thing coming to me, Luca interjected. Sarah is the police, or close enough, and he's in Rizzy's pocket. They'd have intercepted any call to the authorities. He reached across the table as if to take my hand, then seemed to think better of it, and withdrew. I've got my best people looking for her location now. We'll find her. His voice was earnest, but I caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. My mother was leverage, and Rizzy would keep her well hidden until he got what he wanted. I folded my arms tightly around myself. If anything happens to her. My throat closed on the words. In my mind, I pictured her warm smile as she packed me leftover pastries to take home yesterday morning. The fear was paralyzing. Nonna placed a warm hand on mine. We'll pray and trust in Luca, eh? He has a way of keeping those he cares about safe. I looked between them, this fierce old woman and the equally fierce man sitting across from me. I was grateful, but also suddenly angry. Angry that I was in this position, that I'd brought danger to their doorstep, and mostly that these criminals had upended my life in a matter of hours. I pushed the bowl of soup aside. What exactly do you plan to do? I asked Luca, trying to keep my voice steady. Keep me here under guard until they trade my mother for that pendant? Go to war with Rizzy? Either way, I refuse to just sit like a trapped rabbit. Luca's gaze hardened slightly. What I plan, he answered, is to keep you alive and your mother alive. If that means you stay here where I can protect you, then yes, for now. His matter-of-fact tone sparked my frustration. So I'm a prisoner. Is that it? Another guest who doesn't disappear in your city? I couldn't help the bitterness that crept in. You basically kidnapped me from that cafe. I saved you from that cafe. Luca shot back, a touch of impatience breaking through. He took a breath, steadying himself. Elena, I know you didn't ask for any of this, and I'm sorry you got dragged into my world tonight. But if I hadn't intervened, Sarah would have you at gunpoint, and Rizzy would have that pendant, And your mother, he trailed off, the implication clear. I bit my lip, tears of helpless anger prickling. I hated that he was right. I hate feeling powerless, I whispered. They took everything from me tonight, my sense of safety, my agency. Even now you're all deciding where I go, what I do. Luca leaned forward, eyes intense. You're right, he said. You should have a say. He spread his hands, relenting. If you truly want to leave, I won't stop you. But consider what you'd be walking into. Rizzy's men will expect you to try to trade yourself for your mother, and they will snatch you up in a heartbeat. I can't allow that. I opened my mouth to argue, but he continued firmly. Not because I want to control you, Elena, but because I gave you my word. I'd keep you safe and help save your mother. I don't break my word. So if you leave, it'll be with a real plan to keep you both alive. If you stay, I promise you'll have more control, more choices, than you would out there on your own. The choice is yours. His words hung in the air. I hadn't expected him to surrender any control. The fight went out of me, replaced by grudging gratitude. He was giving me an out, or at least the illusion of one, and oddly, that made me trust him even more. Nonna cleared her throat pointedly. I see 2 stubborn mules at my table instead of 1, she muttered. But I caught the hint of a smile on her lips. She set a teapot down and poured steaming herbal tea into a cup, pushing it in front of me. Drink. It'll calm your nerves, Bella. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, deliberating. Luca watched me in respectful silence, not pressing. Finally, I met his gaze. I'll stay. For now, I emphasized quietly, but not because I'm your prisoner or just because I'm scared. I'll stay because I don't have a better plan yet, and because my mother needs me to stay alive. My voice firmed, but if I think of a way to get her back on my own terms, I'm taking it. Understood? A flicker of admiration passed through Luca's eyes. He inclined his head. Fair enough. As long as those terms include not handing yourself over to a madman alone, we are in agreement. Nonna patted my shoulder approvingly and shot Luca a look that plainly said, "Be nice." He gave a slight, rueful smile. The tea's warmth and the temporary victory of holding on to some autonomy gave me a second wind. My thoughts turned to the one piece of leverage we had, the pendant. I reached into my pocket. Luca must have slipped it back to me when we got out of the car and pulled out the small gold object. In the bright kitchen light, I examined it properly for the first time. It was a delicate oval locket, about 1 inch long, with a raised family crest on the front, a shield flanked by 2 lions and topped with a crown. The design was antique, maybe Renaissance era, but something about the metal felt heavier than it should. That tickled my instincts as an art restorer. "What do you know about this crest?" I asked quietly, looking up at Luca and Nonna. Perhaps it was my imagination, but Nonna's expression darkened just a touch as she peered at it. Luca took the pendant from my palm gingerly and studied it, his thumb brushing over the engraving. "It's the old crest of the Bianchi family. They were once one of Verona's prominent families. Long before my time. The last I heard of that name was years ago, in some story my father told." Nonna clicked her tongue. "Bianchi. A bad breed. All of them. Traitors." She looked away, lips thinning. I filed that away. There was clearly some history there. "Whatever it is, Rizzy is willing to kill for it," I said. "Which means it's more than just a pretty trinket. I suspect there's something hidden inside." Luca's brows rose. "Inside? Like a secret compartment?" I nodded, already turning the locket around to examine the edges. At the site, I found it tucked behind a loose brick painted over during an 18th century renovation. People hid messages and valuables in such lockets all the time. Microfilm especially in the mid-20th century, like during wartime espionage or in the mob wars of the 80s. I realized I was rambling a bit, the researcher in me taking over, and snapped back to the present. If I can open it without destroying whatever's inside, we might know what Rizzy is after. Luca immediately stood. "What do you need? Good light, tweezers, a magnifying glass if you have one, and maybe some isopropyl alcohol or oil to loosen any mechanisms if it's old." Nonna huffed, already moving. "I have just the thing. Your grandfather's magnifier is in the study. Luca, get her the first aid kit from the hall. There's alcohol in it. I'll fetch my sewing kit for tweezers." I hadn't expected them to leap to assist like this, and a lump of gratitude formed in my throat. Within minutes, I had a bright desk lamp shining on the pendant laid out on a clean handkerchief at the dining table. Luca hovered at my shoulder while I delicately probed the locket seam with a small pair of sewing scissors. Tweezers proved too thick. The world shrank to just the tiny golden oval in front of me. My tongue stuck out slightly in concentration as I felt for any give in the metal. There, I breathed, feeling a tiny irregularity along the rim. I dabbed a bit of alcohol with a cotton swab, then pressed the point of the scissors gently. With a soft click, a portion of the filigree edge depressed. "It's a latch," I exclaimed softly. Carefully, I pried at the seam, and the pendant split open by a hair. I glimpsed a dark sliver of something inside, a roll of something no bigger than a grain of rice. My heart pounded. Microfilm, just as I thought. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the night, followed by the splintering crash of glass. The lamp on the table shattered, plunging the corner of the room into darkness. I screamed as shards flew past us, and an ear-splitting gunshot report rolled through the hills. Luca reacted instantly. "Down, down!" he yelled, lunging to push me to the floor. I clutched the pendant reflexively in one hand as I hit the hardwood, Luca's body half covering mine. My ears rang from the close-range gunfire. Nona shouted something incoherent from the kitchen. There was a second crack, wood splintering this time, as another bullet punched through the window frame above. Sniper, my mind registered dimly. We were being shot at. Luca dragged me by the arm swiftly behind the thick stone half-wall that separated the dining area from the kitchen, and out of direct line of the windows. My breaths came in panicked gasps, but I clung to the pendant and kept my head down. Luca pressed me against the wall, his face inches from mine in the darkness. "Are you hurt?" he demanded in a low voice, eyes searching mine. "No," I managed, though my pulse was skittering wildly. "You?" He shook his head, then spoke into a tiny mic pinned inside his shirt collar that I hadn't noticed before. "Sniper, East Ridge. Second floor window compromised. Take him." His tone was ice-cold and authoritative. Somewhere outside, I heard a distant pop, another gunshot. And then silence. A tense beat passed. My ears strained, but no more shots came. Only the distant chirp of crickets filled the void. I realized I'd been holding my breath and let it out in a shudder. Heavy footsteps pounded up the hallway as Marco and another guard, Stefano, rushed in, handguns drawn. "Boss, you okay?" Marco hissed. "We're fine," Luca replied. "Status?" Stefano held a finger to an earpiece. "Got him. The Hill team reports the shooter is down. No other movement detected." Luca nodded grimly. "Lock everything down. Check the perimeter again, and get someone to patch that window." As the guards moved to secure the area, Nonna emerged from behind the kitchen island, surprisingly unruffled except for a furious glint in her eye. She surveyed the damage. The dining area window had a neat round hole through the glass. The lamp was destroyed, and a dark red stain was spreading across her lace tablecloth from where the tea had spilt. "In my house? On my tablecloth? I'll bury them myself. The figlio di cane," she swore, shaking a fist toward the shattered window. Despite the shock, I almost let out a hysterical laugh. The sight of this plucky grandmother cursing out a sniper was absurd and strangely comforting. Luca stood, pulling me up gently with him. He brushed glass shards out of my hair with a touch that was both urgent and tender. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly, eyes flashing with anger. Whether at himself or our attackers, I wasn't sure. My hands were still trembling, but I opened my fist to reveal the pendant, miraculously still intact. "They're getting desperate," I said, voice unsteady. "Rizzy must know we're onto something with this." "Perhaps," Luca muttered. "Or they tracked us somehow." We exchanged a look of realization. How had a sniper pinpointed us at this villa so quickly? The drive up had been circuitous, and Luca's people were clearly experienced at evasive maneuvers. One of the guards stepped forward, clearing his throat. He held something small between his thumb and forefinger. "Boss, I think we found the answer." Luca and I leaned in to see. The guard placed a tiny object on the table, no bigger than a shirt button. "What is that?" I asked, perplexed. The guard grimaced. "A GPS tracker, industrial grade." We swept the car and ourselves. Nothing. Then we checked Miss Moretti's belongings. His gaze fell to my discarded muddy heels by the door. It was embedded in the lining of her shoe. I gaped at the little black device on the table. "In my shoe? That's impossible. I never..." Luca gently picked up the tracker, turning it over in his hand. His face was unreadable, but I sensed a storm behind his eyes. I racked my brain. How on earth did a tracker get in my high heel? Those were my favorite pair. I wore them often. Suddenly I remembered. Earlier tonight, before I left for the blind date, I'd been at Julia's apartment. She'd insisted I borrow a nicer pair of heels since mine were scuffed. My stomach dropped. Julia had handed me those very shoes with a strange, nervous smile. "Oh, Julia, what did you do?" "I didn't put that there," I said quickly, looking up at Luca in horror. "I swear, I had no idea." "I know," Luca said, his voice surprisingly calm, but with an undertone of betrayal that wasn't directed at me. His fist closed around the tracker, knuckles whitening. "I know who did. 7 p.m., Piazza delle Erbe, Verona. Opera benefit gala." The next day passed in a blur of urgent preparations and simmering tension. By evening, I found myself stepping out of a sleek Maserati onto the ancient cobblestones of Piazza delle Erbe, Verona's oldest market square. The sun was low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the medieval towers and frescoed facades surrounding the piazza. A temporary stage had been set up at one end, ornate banners advertising an opera benefit performance for the city's historic preservation fund. Crowds of well-dressed patrons mingled under strings of lights and vendor tents. It would have been a beautiful, festive scene, were it not for the undercurrent of danger pulsing in my veins. I smoothed my hands down the borrowed emerald green evening gown that Nonna Rosa had magically procured for me. It fit perfectly, though I scarcely cared how I looked. My eyes were already scanning the throng of attendees, looking for threats. Luca stepped to my side, immaculate in a tailored black suit, a reassuring hand at my elbow as if we were any other couple arriving for a gala date. Only I knew that beneath his jacket, he carried 2 concealed firearms, and in my tiny jeweled clutch lay a burner phone and a small canister of pepper spray. Not exactly a normal night at the opera. "Easy," Luca murmured, noticing the way I stiffened at the approach of 2 uniformed police officers by the entrance. I flashed back to Captain Sarah's false uniform and swallowed hard. But these were real local police hired for event security, and they barely glanced at us as we passed through the checkpoint. I forced a calm smile onto my face, acutely aware that we might be walking straight into a trap. In fact, we intended to. This was the plan we'd agreed on. Show ourselves in public, draw out the vipers. Luca had contacts who'd confirmed that Gabriele Rizzi and some of his political cronies were expected at this charity event, one that conveniently benefited historic sites like the very church and tunnels where I'd been chased. Rizzi's fingers were in every pie in Verona, it seemed. "There's a good chance Sarah or Rizzi will make a move here, in the open, because they think we won't risk a scene," Luca had explained earlier. "If we can flush them out, we might find your mother's location or force a confrontation on our terms." I had agreed to the plan, but on one condition. "I attend, but I control my exits," I'd said. "No more whisking me away without telling me. If I sense something off, I leave. And you won't stop me." Luca had only hesitated a moment before inclining his head. "Agreed. Just stay in public view and wear this," he'd added, handing me a discreet earpiece that now nested in my left ear hidden by my hair. It let us communicate if separated, and let me hear the chatter of Luca's security team who were scattered among the crowd in plain clothes. Now, as we moved through clusters of Verona's elite, city councilors, wealthy patrons, socialites, I tried to look like I belonged. It was nearly impossible. My nerves were stretched taut, and every older man in a tuxedo made my stomach clench, wondering if he was Rizzi. "Breathe, Elena," came Luca's low voice through the tiny earpiece. Outwardly, he was smiling politely at a pair of businessmen who greeted him, but his words were meant for me alone. "We'll spot them. Marco's team is in position." I nodded, swallowing. Nonna's words from earlier echoed to calm me. "Trust in Luca." Luca guided me toward the center of the piazza. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi near a fountain where people gathered, sipping Prosecco. From here, I had a vantage of the entire square. I scanned the perimeter. There, by the stone archway leading out toward the river, a familiar, stocky figure lingered, pretending to admire a statue. Recognition jolted me. It was one of the goons who had chased me through the tunnels, now in a neat blazer. Rizzi's man, unmistakably. I touched my arm lightly, the signal we'd established. "By the Scaliger Arch," I murmured, pretending to admire the classical fountain statue. "One of Rizzi's men." "I see him," Luca replied under his breath, dipping his head as if whispering something intimate in my ear. I felt his fingers brush my waist for effect, sending a little shiver through me that wasn't entirely fear. "Stefano has eyes on him now. Don't stare." I forced myself to giggle softly as if Luca had told a joke, and turned my attention back to the party. My heart pounded. They were here. Would Rizzi himself come out of the shadows? As if in answer, a ripple in the crowd revealed a tall, silver-haired man, glad handing a local councilwoman near the gelato stand. He wore a white dinner jacket and held a cane, more for show than necessity, given his vigorous movements. I recognized that face from news articles, Gabriele Rizzi. He looked so distinguished, one would never guess his empire was built on blood. Cold anger settled over me. That man had ordered my mother's kidnapping, tried to kill us. Seeing him laughing among unaware citizens made my skin crawl. Elena, Luca's voice came softly, as his hand found mine, squeezing. He hadn't looked Rizzi's way, but of course he'd noticed him too. Steady, there's a time for everything. I realized my hand in his was trembling, and quickly released the tension, nodding. Luca was right. We needed patience and proof. That microfilm in the pendant could expose Rizzi, but only if we lived long enough to use it. We meandered further into the throng. An announcement rang out that the opera performances would begin shortly. People were moving towards the rows of chairs set up before the stage at the far end of the piazza. I scanned again for any sign of Captain Sarah or, my breath hitched, Julia, though after last night, I didn't know whether I wanted to hug my friend or strangle her. We hadn't had time to truly discuss Julia's role beyond the obvious. She had been used to track me. Luca's investigators determined Rizzi's men had bribed her with some big debt forgiveness to plant the tracker. It sickened and infuriated me, but I also knew Julia. If she'd done it, she must have thought it harmless, or be under dire pressure. I prayed I'd get the chance to find out why. A voice suddenly crackled in my earpiece, Marco's voice. Captain Sarah, East Entrance. He's got 2 men with him, plain clothes. I tensed and followed Luca's subtle gaze toward the eastern arcade of the piazza. Sure enough, strolling in with false casualness was Captain Vito Serra. Out of uniform now, he looked like any other security detail in his dark suit and earpiece. My blood ran cold. He's here, I whispered. I see. Stick close to me, Luca replied. But a knot of guests separated me briefly from Luca as I stepped around a waiter with a tray of drinks. In that split second, I saw Captain Sarra adjust his route, heading not toward us, but toward the stage's side area, perhaps looping to avoid Luca's notice. Luca was momentarily engaged, shaking hands with an acquaintance who'd intercepted him, a local wine merchant slapping him on the back. Into my earpiece, Marco muttered, "Target is on the move. Boss, he's circling toward you from the north side." Luca disengaged politely from the merchant and turned, scanning the crowd for me. I was only a few steps away, but a cluster of people blocked our line of sight. I took a step to go back to him when a hand touched my elbow. "Elena, my dear," came a familiar voice. Julia's voice. I whirled around. Julia stood there in a simple black dress, her eyes wide and anxious. My stomach flipped. "Julia, what are you doing here?" Before she could answer, a figure loomed behind her. Captain Sarra. He placed a heavy hand on Julia's shoulder. My friend winced. "Good evening, Miss Moretti," Sarah said with a cordial smile that didn't reach his steely eyes. "So glad you could join us, and I see you found your friend. She's been worried about you." I looked frantically between Julia and Sarah. Julia's face was ashen, tear tracks marring her makeup. "Elena, I'm sorry," she blurted out, voice cracking. "They made me—" "Shh." Sarah cut her off, tightening his grip on Julia. Around us, laughter and applause rose as the first opera singer took the stage and music soared. We were being swallowed by the crowd's attention turning to the performance, leaving us isolated at the fringes. My mind raced. This was bad. Luca was on the other side of a sea of people now sitting down, and the music would drown out any call for help. I reached for the pepper spray in my clutch with my free hand, but Sarah saw and smoothly caught my wrist. "None of that," he said pleasantly, as though scolding a child. Under his jacket, I glimpsed the unmistakable shape of a gun holster. "Let's not make a scene. After all, we're all friends here, aren't we?" Julia gave a choked sob. My heart thundered. We were trapped in plain sight. I had to do something. "Captain Sarra," I said, trying to mirror his composed tone, "if you're here to negotiate, I'm sure Luca would be happy to talk. There's no need for this." His lips curled. "Oh, I think Mr. DeSantis and I will talk soon enough. But he's not the one currently holding a valuable object, is he?" My pulse skipped. Did they think I had the pendant on me? Luca and I had decided he'd keep it safe tonight, hidden with Marco. Maybe they assumed I had it since I found it. I began, but he cut me off. "Why else do you think Rizzi wanted you so badly, Miss Moretti? He assumed you might still have it, or know how to get it." Sarah nodded to one of his men who suddenly appeared on my other side. They flanked Julia and me discreetly. Anyone glancing over would just see 2 men escorting a pair of ladies away. Nothing amiss. My earpiece crackled. Luca's urgent voice. "Elena? Where are you?" I caught a glimpse of him pushing through a row of seated guests, scanning frantically. But we were already being moved toward the edge of the piazza, Sarah's men firm at our elbows. I inhaled to shout, but a flash of metal under Sarah's jacket warned me. He'd shoot us or some bystander without hesitation. And Julia. She was trembling, fear in her eyes. "Don't try it," Sarah murmured as if reading my mind. "Your friend here already made that mistake and we caught her. You wouldn't want anyone to get hurt in the crossfire, would you?" Bile rose in my throat. I felt Julia squeeze my hand weakly. I squeezed back, letting her know I didn't blame her right now, that I'd protect her if I could. "Let them go," I said through clenched teeth. "I'll come with you quietly. Just let Julia go enjoy the opera." Sarah chuckled. "Admirable, but I'm afraid Signor Rizzi insists on both of you." He leaned in, whispering almost kindly, "Don't worry, he has a fondness for dramatic flair. He promised a memorable reunion for you all." As we neared the archway exit, a sudden commotion erupted near the stage. A firecracker or a stage cannon prop misfired, drawing oohs and gasps from the crowd. In the brief distraction, I acted on instinct. I twisted hard, wrenching out of the thug's grasp on my left, and drove my heel down onto Sarah's foot behind me. He hissed in pain, loosening his hold on Julia. "Run!" I yelled and tried to shove Julia ahead toward the milling crowd. Julia hesitated a split second too long, confusion and hope in her eyes. One of the other men lunged, seizing her arm. Simultaneously, Sarah recovered and snatched me back by the waist with brute force. I felt something sharp jab against my ribs, probably the muzzle of his gun through his jacket. "Enough," he growled in my ear, breath hot with irritation. "Or your friend gets a bullet now." Julia cried out as the thug gripped her hair, pressing a pistol to her side under cover of the now standing audience. The small explosion had caused many to rise in alarm. My heart plummeted. We were beaten. With practiced efficiency, Sarah and his partner maneuvered us out through the archway and down a side alley, away from the prying eyes of the piazza. I caught one last glimpse of Luca breaking into a run in the distance, Marco and others fanning out behind him. They'd realized I was gone. I wanted to scream that it wasn't Luca's fault, that I'd been foolish enough to stray, but all I could do was leave behind one of my earrings, flicking it to the pavement as we were hustled around a corner. A tiny breadcrumb. The operatic music faded as we were forced into a waiting black car. They bound our wrists with zip ties and covered our eyes with soft blindfolds, surprisingly gentle in their motions despite the guns prodding us. Julia sniffled beside me in the dark back seat. "Elena, I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice quavering. "I never wanted to drag you into this." "Shh, we'll be okay," I lied, inching my bound hands toward hers until our fingers interlaced. Despite my anger, I squeezed her hand. She was all I had with me, and I needed her to stay calm. The car sped off, taking a convoluted route. I tried to keep track of turns. Left, another left, a long straight stretch, right, but soon I was completely disoriented. After perhaps 15 minutes, we came to a stop and were marched out of the vehicle. The blindfolds were removed. I blinked in the dim, amber light and found we were in what looked like an old stone cellar. Damp air, the scent of moss and candle wax, and carved pillars. Perhaps an old crypt beneath one of Verona's churches. I trust Rizzi to choose somewhere appropriately theatrical for a villainous rendezvous. Julia and I were made to stand in the center of the space as Sarah's 2 henchmen searched us swiftly and efficiently. They removed my earpiece and tossed it aside. My clutch was gone, probably taken earlier. We were truly cut off now. Footsteps echoed on the stone staircase. Gabriele Rizzi descended, clapping slowly, the sound eerie in the chamber. He was flanked by another armed guard. "Bellissima performance," he said, smiling that politician's smile. "Brava, Elena, and you brought a guest. Splendid." I glared at him, anger momentarily overriding fear. "Where is my mother, you bastard?" Rizzi tisked, wagging a finger. "Such hostility. Your mother is safe for now, as long as everyone cooperates. But I'm disappointed. I gave DeSantis a simple choice last night, and he chose poorly. So now, new game." He stepped closer, and one of his men shoved Julia and me down to our knees. The stone floor bit into my legs. Julia whimpered, and I could feel her shaking. Rizzi cupped my chin and forced me to look up at him. His eyes were the pale gray of tombstones, cold and pitiless. "This could all have been easy, my dear. All I want is that pendant. It belongs to me, after all. Well, To my associates, technically. It was stolen from us decades ago. Can you imagine my surprise when I learned a charming art restorer had found it? I wrenched my face out of his grip. If it's yours, why chase me? I would have handed it over if asked. Instead, you nearly killed me and now my mother. He sighed dramatically. Yes, regrettable tactics. My partners were impatient, I admit, but now that you've involved Don DeSantis by stumbling into his arms, things have gotten more complicated. He crouched to look me in the eye, his tone softening to a practiced gentleness. Do you know what's inside that trinket? I stayed silent, unwilling to give anything away. Rizzy went on anyway, eyes glittering. A microfilm, he answered himself, pleased to lecture. With very important information someone hid long ago. Bank routes, names, transactions, evidence that could burn the city's entire delicate web of alliances to ash. My name is on it, yes, but so is DeSantis's, his father's to be precise. Rizzy tilted his head. Luca's beloved father. Did he ever tell you how he died? Shot in the back by a supposed ally. An ally whose name happens to appear on that list of traitors. My heart lurched. Luca's father was killed? And somehow this pendant held clues to that? If true, no wonder Luca recognized the crest and had taken this so personally. Rizzy saw the realization in my face and grinned. Ah, so he didn't share that with you. Perhaps he doesn't know yet, but he will when he sees what's inside. Everyone's sins come to light eventually. I set my jaw. So you want it to cover your own sins. His friendly facade dropped, eyes flashing with cruelty. I want it because it's mine. Verona is mine. I won't have some dead mafioso's insurance policy resurrected to threaten what I built. Julia, still kneeling beside me, found her voice in a burst of guilt. Elena, I told them where to find you that night at the cafe, she sobbed. I thought if I helped, they'd let me go, but then they kept me. Quiet, snarled one of the guards, jostling her. I leaned toward her instinctively, shoulder to shoulder, hoping to provide some comfort. Rizzy waved the guard off. No, let her cry. The sound adds a lovely pathos, don't you think? He regarded Julia with mild distaste. Ms. Julia was a useful little mouse, but her part in this story is nearly over. I felt Julia tremble harder. You have me now, I said quickly. Let her go. She's no further use to you. You got what you wanted from her, right? Rizzy stood up, smoothing his lapel. What I want, dear Elena, is Luca DeSantis kneeling where you are. I offered him a chance to trade himself for your mother. Instead, he took you to play house on a hill. So now, we raise the stakes. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone, tapping it. A second later, my blood ran cold as I heard Julia's phone ring from somewhere nearby. Sarah withdrew it from his pocket and held it up. On speaker, it played a voice message Rizzy had prepared. Julia's own voice echoed in the crypt, sobbing and desperate. Elena, please. Help me, followed by a man's cruel laugh and a splash of water sounds. Rizzy halted the playback and smiled at me, almost kindly. Here's what's going to happen. You, my dear, are going to call Mr. DeSantis. You will tell him that if he doesn't come to Ponte Pietra at sunset, unarmed and alone, your friend becomes the river. The sun hung low over Verona, setting the Adige River ablaze with orange and gold. Tourists wandered the pedestrian span of the Ponte Pietra, snapping photos of the postcard-perfect skyline. A violinist nearby played a haunting aria that echoed off the stone arches. To any outsider, it was a scene of pure Italian charm at dusk. But at the center of the bridge, a far darker drama was unfolding. Gabriele Rizzi stood with his hand loosely around my arm, appearing for all the world like an elegant gentleman, escorting a lady to admire the view. In reality, his grip was vice-like, a warning that I not make a sudden move. On Rizzi's other side, one of his thugs held Julia by the elbow. She looked ready to collapse from fear and exhaustion, her mascara smeared from crying. Two more of Rizzi's men lingered a few paces away, pretending to be engrossed in the violinist's performance, but with guns undoubtedly hidden under their jackets. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I watched the far end of the bridge. Luca was walking toward us, alone, just as instructed. He wore no jacket, just a white dress shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands visible at his sides to prove he carried no weapon. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his stride, the barely leashed anger and worry. He was coming for me, for us. Remember, Rizzy murmured to me, his tone almost pleasant. No heroics, dear, or Julia takes a river swim with a weight tied to her ankle. I sucked in a sharp breath, forcing myself to nod. The plastic zip tie binding my wrists had been cut when Rizzy hauled me from the car, but I was far from free. Rizzy's men would snatch me in an instant if I bolted. My mind raced for any advantage. My fingers brushed against the back of my head, where Nonna's decorative hairpins still held my twist of hair in place. They hadn't bothered to remove it, deeming it harmless. Carefully, I began easing it out, hidden by the way Rizzy positioned me slightly behind him. Luca closed the distance, stepping up to us under the central lamppost of the bridge. The dying sunlight lit half his face in gold, the other half in shadow. He surveyed the scene. Me, Julia, Rizzy's men. His jaw clenched at the sight of Rizzy's hand on me. "You came alone. Good man," Rizzy greeted him with a silky smile. And promptly, "Sunset just as requested. Let's keep this civil, shall we?" "Let them go, Rizzy," Luca said, voice low and tight. "You've already got my attention. You don't need hostages as well," Rizzy chuckled. "Oh, but I do. See, I suspect you've brought what I want, but there's the matter of ensuring your good behavior. The ladies will be free when I have the pendant in my hand, and you're no longer a threat." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Julia sway on her feet. The thug at her side tightened his hold to keep her upright. Luca's eyes darted to her, then to me. Relief and agony flickered across his face. "Elena, are you hurt?" he asked softly. I managed a tiny shake of my head. "I'm okay," I lied, voice barely above a whisper. "My mother?" "She's safe," Luca interrupted, guessing my question. "My people found her. She's safe, Elena." A sob of relief nearly escaped me. Mama was safe. I closed my eyes a moment, sending a silent prayer of thanks. When I opened them, Rizzy's face had darkened with displeasure. "Tsk. I suppose I should have anticipated that," Rizzy mused. "No matter. I still have leverage." He nodded to Julia, and the thug holding her produced a knife. Pressing it subtly to her side, Julia whimpered, her tear-filled eyes locking with mine. "Enough," Luca's voice rang sharply, drawing Rizzy's attention. He lifted his hand slowly, revealing a small black velvet pouch I recognized from Marco's safe. My heart skipped. The pendant. "This is what you want, yes? The microfilm is inside." Rizzy's gaze latched onto the pouch. "Toss it here." Luca's fingers tightened on the pouch's drawstrings. "Release them first." Rizzy barked a short laugh. "You're in no position to bargain, DeSantis. Throw me the pouch. Or shall I have Captain Sarah carve up Ms. Julia right here for the tourists to record?" I flinched at the imagery. Around us, a few oblivious onlookers were indeed filming the beautiful sunset on their phones, luckily not close enough to see the true nature of our exchange. Yet, Luca's nostrils flared. His eyes met mine, then flicked to Julia. I could see the calculations in his mind, the torment of weighing our lives against the microfilm. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, just hold on." He took the pendant out of the pouch carefully. The golden oval caught the last rays of sun, glinting. Rizzy's eyes shone with greed. "Think, Elena. We had one pendant, 4 armed goons. One Luca with no gun, and me with a hairpin and pepper spray capsule still hidden in my bra. They hadn't found it during the pat-down, thank God. Not great odds. But perhaps I didn't need a weapon. Perhaps I just needed to create chaos." As Luca looked at me again, I subtly moved my hand behind my back, showing him the long, sharp hairpin I had freed from my updo. His eyes narrowed imperceptibly. I hoped he understood I had a plan of some sort. Luca cleared his throat, addressing Rizzy. "This microfilm, do you even know what's on it, Rizzy? Names of all your collaborators, including the ones who murdered my father." He spoke loudly, as if wanting witnesses. "If you do this, if you hurt these women, I'll make sure everything on it goes public. The city will burn, and you with it." A few heads of passing tourists turned our way curiously, sensing the confrontation under the normal conversation. Rizzy sneered, stepping closer to Luca while still gripping my arm. "Spare me the theatrics. We both know you won't destroy it. Too many of your people are on it as well. Now stop stalling and give it here." For a moment, Luca didn't move. I could see the vein ticking in his temple. He hated handing over something that could ensure Rizzy's impunity, but with Julia's life at stake and me in Rizzy's clutches, he had no choice. Luca extended his arm, holding the pendant between 2 fingers. Rizzy reached out with his free hand eagerly. This was it. I struck, with one decisive motion. I yanked my arm out of Rizzy's slackening grip and jabbed Nona's sharp hairpin straight into the meaty part of Rizzy's palm. He bellowed in pain and surprise, instinctively recoiling. I seized that half second to slam my elbow into his ribs and spin away. Simultaneously, with his other hand, Luca snapped the pendant closed again, and instead of handing it over, he flung it high into the air, over the side of the bridge. "No!" Rizzy roared. All hell broke loose. One of the goons lunged toward the railing, tracking the arc of the pendant as it hurtled toward the river below. Two others rushed at Luca, who sidestepped, catching one by the arm and using the man's momentum to hurl him against the stone parapet. Tourists screamed and scattered, finally realizing this wasn't a friendly gathering. In the confusion, I dashed toward Julia. The man with the knife had loosened his hold to see what his boss would do, and Julia twisted free and stumbled into my arms. I quickly dragged her toward a cluster of stunned tourists for cover. "Don't move!" a voice shouted. Captain Sarah, appearing at the foot of the bridge with more armed men. Likely backup Rizzy had called in. They began waving guns, ordering bystanders to clear off the bridge. Pandemonium erupted as people fled screaming. My heart pounded. We needed to disappear into that chaos or we were done for. I fumbled the small pepper spray canister out from under the neckline of my dress. Meanwhile, Rizzy, still cursing in pain, had recovered enough to see Luca grappling with his remaining thug. "Sarah," he barked, pointing at me and Julia. "Grab them." Captain Sarah advanced on us, pistol drawn. I pushed Julia behind me, my thumb finding the spray trigger. I only had one shot at this. Sarah grabbed my shoulder, gun aimed at my chest. I whipped up the pepper spray and blasted it directly into his face. Sarah howled, hands flying to his eyes as the aerosol blinded him. He fired wildly. I felt the searing burn as a bullet grazed my upper arm. I cried out and fell back, but Julia caught me before I hit the ground. Despite the pain, a fierce satisfaction coursed through me seeing the mighty captain collapse to his knees, choking and clawing at his swollen eyes. We had to keep moving. "Go, Julia!" I gasped, pushing her to run toward the city side of the bridge where people were fleeing. She hesitated, unwilling to leave me, but I shoved her harder. "Find the police. The real police. Go!" Tears streaking her face, Julia finally nodded and disappeared into the frantic crowd pushing off the bridge. Relief and fear warred in me. She might get caught again, but at least one of us had a chance at freedom now. I pressed a shaking hand to the bleeding stripe on my arm and turned back to the melee. Luca was in a fierce fist fight with Rizzy's last goon, the one he hadn't thrown. With an almost casual grace, Luca dodged a swing and landed a hard punch to the man's jaw, knocking him out cold. But in that moment of victory, Rizzy charged at Luca from behind and slammed a cane, no, a sword, against Luca's side. The cane had a hidden blade that now glinted with red along its edge. He'd slashed Luca. "Luca!" I screamed, watching him stagger. A dark crimson stain spread quickly across the white of his shirt, just under the ribs. Luca dropped to one knee, one hand pressed to his side. Rizzy stood over him, sword cane poised for a finishing strike, his face twisted in triumph. I didn't think. I snatched up the fallen thug's pistol from the ground and aimed it at Rizzy, my hands shaking. "Stop! Don't you touch him!" My voice was raw with panic. Rizzy hesitated, his eyes flicking to me. He smiled cruelly. "Elena, dear, you don't have it in you to shoot. Now put that down." A shot rang out. I pulled the trigger. I wasn't even conscious of making the decision, and shattered the lamppost glass above Rizzy's head. I'd missed on purpose or out of shock, I wasn't sure, but it was enough to startle him back. He snarled, raising the sword toward me now. But a new sound cut through the chaos. Sirens, growing louder. Blue lights flashed at the far end of the bridge. Police cars. Lots of them. The real police, finally. Rizzy's eyes darted around. His backup was incapacitated or fled. His prize, the pendant, likely sinking in the river, and law enforcement was closing in. For the first time, I saw fear cross his features. He backed away toward the opposite end of the bridge. Luca, still on one knee and bleeding, lunged and caught Rizzy's leg, and trying to drag him down. Rizzy kicked free, leaving Luca coughing on the pavement. I rushed to Luca's side, dropping the gun and nearly slipping on his blood as I knelt. I pressed my hand over his, trying to staunch the bleeding in his side. "Luca, hold on, please." He looked up at me, pain etched on his face, yet he managed a faint, rueful smile. I told myself I should have let you walk away that first night. Despite the horror around us, that confession stunned me. My throat tightened. Then, "Why didn't you?" A shadow of regret and admiration flickered in his eyes. "Because you didn't beg," he whispered. "You negotiated." A tear spilled down my cheek at his words. This dangerous man, who had seemed so untouchable, had fallen for me because I stood my ground. I let out a half sob, half laugh. Before I could respond, a harsh click sounded behind me. Rizzy stood a few paces away, breathing hard, his pistol now leveled directly at Luca and me. We were at point-blank range, and I had no time to reach for my dropped gun. Luca, wounded as he was, tried to push me behind him. I clung to him, refusing to budge. We faced Rizzy together, defenseless. Rizzy's finger tightened on the trigger, but he hesitated, eyes calculating. He gave Luca a thin, vicious smile. "Now choose, DeSantis," he panted, blood dripping from the hand I'd stabbed. "The woman, or the city." Later that night, Ponte Pietra, Verona. Blue and red lights strobed across the ancient stone bridge as uniformed police finally flooded the scene. Within minutes, Rizzy's remaining men were disarmed and in handcuffs, and Captain Vito Serra, half-blinded by pepper spray, was being dragged to a police van, cursing and screaming that he was on their side. The officers looked at him with disgust. His betrayal was evident to everyone now, caught in the act alongside Rizzy's thugs. Bystanders filmed on their phones as one of Verona's supposed protectors was shoved into the back of a cruiser. I knelt beside Luca, pressing our wadded jackets against the bleeding wound in his side. My arm throbbed from the bullet graze, but I hardly felt it over my panic for Luca. His face was ashen, breath coming in shallow pants. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," Marco said, crouching on Luca's other side. At some point, he and other members of Luca's security team had emerged from the chaos to help. Marco's forehead was slick with sweat and concern. Luca managed a weak chuckle, looking between me and Marco. "Is everyone okay?" he rasped. I let out a breathy laugh of relief. Even half dead, he was worrying about us. "Julia got away safe. The police have her," I said, squeezing his hand. "My mother is safe. And Nonna, oh God, Nonna's probably worried sick." As if invoked by name, I heard Nonna Rosa's voice barreling through the throng. "That is my grandson, move, imbecile, or I'll box your ears." Nonna shoved her way past a flustered officer and practically skidded to Luca's side, falling to her knees. "Luca, Gesù Maria, what have they done to you?" He gave a faint smile. "Just a scratch, Nonna," he lied. She saw the blood-soaked jacket and paled, but quickly composed herself. "Basta, enough. The ambulance will fix you up, Tesoro. Don't you dare close your eyes." She patted his cheek lightly, and then looked at me, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. "And you, Elena, you're bleeding." "I'm fine, Nonna," I said softly. Only then did she notice my arm wound and tear her scarf off to tie around it tightly. Within moments, paramedics arrived with a stretcher. They lifted Luca, and I refused to leave his side, clambering into the ambulance with him. Nonna squeezed in as well. Despite protests, one wag of her finger silenced the medic's objections. As they worked to stabilize Luca, I held his hand, refusing to let go. He drifted in and out of consciousness on the brief ride to the hospital, but whenever he opened his eyes, they searched for me, and I was there. "And don't you dare scare me like this," I whispered, bending to his ear at one point, tears dropping onto the ambulance sheets. "We have unfinished business, you and I." His fingers tightened weakly around mine. "I'm not going anywhere," he breathed. I pressed a kiss to his knuckles, praying it was true. 2 weeks later, DeSantis Family Vineyard, Verona Hills. Luca DeSantis kept his word. Rizzy's criminal network had crumbled in the days following the bridge showdown. The microfilm, miraculously retrieved from the Adige River by Luca's men that same night, proved to be a trove of incriminating evidence. As I later learned, Luca had anticipated a double cross. Unknown to Rizzy, I had already extracted the microfilm from the pendant back at the villa and given it to Marco for safekeeping. The pendant Luca tossed was empty, a fact that made me weak with relief when I found out. With the microfilm turned over to a trustworthy prosecutor, one of the few not entangled with Rizzy's bribes, arrests swept through the city like a cleansing storm. Corrupt officials, mobsters, and yes, Captain Sarah, all faced charges ranging from corruption to conspiracy to murder. The news plastered their photos everywhere, Rizzy being led away in handcuffs, sputtering with indignation, Sarah hiding his face as crowds jeered. Verona's underworld was dragged into the light. As for my part, I gave a thorough statement about everything, from finding the pendant to being hunted to the final confrontation. I was even called to speak at a closed-door hearing, where my detailed knowledge as an art restorer helped authenticate the age of the microfilm and its contents. It felt good, empowering even, to help bring these criminals to justice not with a gun in hand, but with the truth. Throughout it all, Luca was never far from my side, save for the day he spent in surgery and the couple of days recovering under Nonna's strict eye. Though some in the media tried to paint him as just another mafioso, the evidence on the microfilm revealed he'd actually been quietly cooperating with federal authorities for months to undermine Rizzy. Much to my surprise, Luca had been working from the inside to dismantle the worst elements of the old guard, all without tainting his own hands with innocent blood. In the end, he came out of the scandal not as a suspected criminal, but as a sort of rogue hero. Verona's very own Dark Knight, some headlines joked. None of that mattered to me as much as this moment, however. I stood on a gentle slope of the DeSantis family vineyard under the late afternoon sun, so the rows of grapevines stretched out below, golden in the summer haze. Down by the villa, I could just make out Nonna Rosa fussing over a table spread with food on the terrace. She and my mother were arranging plates while Julia carried out bottles of Luca's wine. She was staying with us for a while, needing the safety and solace after her harrowing ordeal and the guilt she was working through. Nonna had readily folded her into the household like another granddaughter who needed fattening up and pampering. They were all alive and safe. It still felt miraculous. "You're lost in thought again," came Luca's voice from behind me, warm and teasing. I turned and smiled as he walked up the slope to join me. He moved a tad slower than before. He'd taken a bullet after all. In addition to the sword slash, Rizzy did manage to fire a shot in those final seconds, though thankfully it missed anything vital. But Luca's recovery was nearly complete. I reached for his hand and interlaced my fingers with his. It felt so natural now. "Just counting blessings," I said softly, nodding toward the terrace where laughter drifted up from our assembled odd little family. Luca wrapped an arm around my waist, careful of my still bandaged upper arm. "They adore you, you know," he said. "Nonna already wants to adopt you, and your mother, well, she might love me more than you do." I laughed, leaning into him. It felt so good to laugh. Mama is certainly smitten with her charming savior. Every other sentence is, "that nice Luca this and brave Luca that." Nonna and she have already conspired about holiday plans, I'll have you know, he groaned playfully. I feared as much. I'll have to negotiate visitation rights to my own girlfriend. My heart skipped at the word, girlfriend. Such a simple, youthful term for what we had been through, but it fit. I pretended to consider. "Well, perhaps I'll allow it, on one condition." He raised a dark brow. "Name it." I turned in his arm to face him fully. "Promise me. No more secret grand sacrifices or risky solo missions without telling me. If we're doing this," I gestured between us, "we do it together, as partners." His expression softened into that rare, heart-stopping smile. He cupped my cheek gently. "Elena Moretti, I was a lone wolf for a long time. I never imagined wanting a partner by my side, until you." His thumb caressed my cheek. "I promise, no more secrets, no more unilateral decisions. I'm not keeping you as some obligation or trophy. I want you with me because it's where you choose to be." My eyes prickled with emotion at his earnestness. Sometimes I still wondered if he only felt responsible for me because of all we'd gone through. I voiced a sliver of that insecurity. "I won't be just a scared woman you rescued, Luca. I can't be kept in a gilded cage." His brow creased and he pulled me closer. "I don't want a bird in a cage. I want a partner in life. Someone I can protect. Yes, but who also challenges me, stands up to me, negotiates with me." He chuckled softly. "I want you, Elena, not because I got used to having you around out of duty, but because I respect you and—" He hesitated, eyes shining. "And I love you." It was the first time he'd said it outright. My breath caught. Joy and warmth and the steady rightness of his words flooded me. I slid my arms around his neck carefully. "Ti amo, Luca," I whispered back, the words spilling easily and truthfully. "I love you too." He kissed me then, a tender meeting of lips that quickly deepened as all the longing and fear and hope between us merged into that embrace. Under the golden sky, amid the vines, I tasted the promise of a future that felt bright and beautifully uncertain, as long as we faced it together. A distant whoop from the terrace made us break apart, laughing. Nonna was waving a dish towel, probably signaling that dinner was ready, and that she'd seen us kiss. No doubt she'd comment on that later. Hand in hand, Luca and I walked back toward the villa, toward home. Nonna and Mama bustled around placing bowls of homemade gnocchi, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread on the table. Julia poured wine for everyone, her smile the widest I'd seen in ages. Marco and a few of Luca's closest men, now friends, took seats as well, celebrating the victory and survival we all shared. As we sat down, the sun setting behind us in a warm glow, Nonna raised her glass. A toast to familia, old and new. We all lifted our glasses. I looked around the table at the faces of those I loved, my mother, tearful and beaming, Julia, my dearest friend, looking hopeful again. Nona, the soul of this home, brimming with pride, and Luca, at my side, gazing at me with an adoration that made my heart overflow. Nona's voice rang out with emotional fervor. A home isn't the walls around you, it's who eats at your table. Salute! Salute! We echoed, clinking glasses. The wine was sweet and full of life, like everything in this moment. I caught Luca's eye. Home, I said softly, clinking my glass gently to his. Home, he agreed and kissed my forehead. Epilogue. 1 week later, Adage Riverside Cafe. The river gleamed bright under a crisp morning sun as I settled into a familiar corner seat at the Riverside Cafe where my strange journey began. Only this time, I wasn't muddy or frantic. I was clean, composed, and early. I smoothed my sundress and took a sip of cappuccino, savoring the peaceful bustle of Verona starting its day. Luca was parking the car and would join me shortly. We had an appointment at the museum restoration department later. My leave of absence was over, and I was itching to get back, though they'd insisted on a welcome-back party first. Life was edging back toward normal. A new and better normal. Signora Elena? The waiter approached with a puzzled look and a small envelope in hand. This was left for you at the counter. For me? I frowned, accepting the envelope. My name was scrawled across it, no stamp, meaning someone had dropped it off in person. My pulse ticked up. The envelope felt light, like it contained a single card or paper. I opened it carefully. Inside was a postcard image of the Colosseum in Rome. I flipped it over. There was no address, just a short message written in elegant, looping handwriting. Verona was the warm-up. Rome is next. My breath hitched. On the bottom corner of the card, drawn in black ink, was a small crest. 2 lions flanking a shield, topped with a crown, the same crest that had been on the pendant. I raised my eyes in alarm, and immediately scanning the cafe terrace and the street beyond for whoever might have left this. A chill crept down my spine despite the sun's warmth. Luca arrived then, sliding into the chair beside me with a carefree smile that faltered the instant he saw my face. Elena? What's wrong? Wordlessly, I handed him the postcard. As he read it, his expression darkened, the easy morning cheer draining away. He met my eyes, and I saw it there. Concern, determination, and a flicker of excitement at the challenge implied. Looks like our story isn't over, I whispered, managing a small, wry smile. Luca slipped the card into his jacket, then took my hand in his, threading our fingers tightly. His lips brushed my knuckles as he kept his gaze on mine. Not even close, he murmured. And together, we turned to face the sun rising over the river, ready for whatever came next.